Does advice work? That was the subject of a recent video from ViewIQ, and both my answer and theirs is that yes, it does work, so long as you understand and implement it properly. But while their video was about someone who followed advice and it did not work, the case with Frieren's pacing is the exact opposite. There's a lot of advice you can find about pacing, and Frieren goes against a lot of it. Yet in spite of that, it has some of the best pacing in recent memory. This makes it a great case study for better understanding the rules, because learning when a tool does not work is a great way to understand how and when to use it properly. Especially since Frieren doesn't break all the rules, it follows plenty. And that's the key point, because bad storytelling often comes from misunderstanding which rules matter. You see creators toss everything aside in the name of being unique, and the result is often a mess. Frieren doesn't do that. It knows what to use and what to ignore. That makes all the difference. One of the things that surprised me early on is that most episodes are divided into two smaller stories. The first half of the episode usually has very little to do with the second. Not unheard of, but for sure unusual for shows of this type. The reason is most likely the source material. The manga chapters are rather short. Now, anime as a medium is quite infamous for its filler content, so the usual approach for situations like this would have been to stretch out the source material, add some stuff, and get to the 20-minute mark. But thankfully they didn't do that, resulting in a faster pace, which works very well given the second piece of advice it doesn't follow. A generally very good piece of advice is to avoid the and then syndrome. The South Park writers probably said it best. You don't want your script to be like this happened and then this happened and then this happened. What you want instead is this happened, therefore this happened, but this happened. You want a logical connection between your story. For one, it's more satisfying that way. We are pattern-seeking creatures. We naturally enjoy this kind of thing. But it also makes your story more memorable. Whichever part of it you may happen to remember will also bring back the parts before and after. The reason why this happened and what it caused afterwards, which in turn will bring back even more. During the viewing experience, it keeps people from getting lost in the plots that are on the more complicated side. If they end up wondering what is happening and why, it helps to have a clear answer that comes as a logical conclusion to the last scene. This kind of structure is behind most great titles you could probably come up with. Frieren rarely does that. It has instead a lot of self-contained stories, wholly divorced from whatever came before them. But that, along with the first thing I mentioned, works wonders for Frieren pacing. Every 10 minutes you get something new and fresh. A short story with a beginning, a middle and an end. You don't have to keep track of plots or characters. You can just enjoy the moment, which is quite thematic. Most of the show is about Frieren living in the present, taking things one at a time and then letting them go to focus on the next thing. It makes sense for the structure of the show to mirror that. It also more broadly resembles memory in general. This is how a lot of memories are. Fragmented. Little moments, lessons and impressions are often what stick out, often without much of the context of those events, which is part of why Frieren feels so nostalgic even while you're watching it for the first time. It's structured like a memory, sometimes vivid with action and fighting, sometimes hazy with a montage and a time-lapse. You may forget plot points, but you'll remember characters quietly sitting by the water, or a quiet chat by the fire, and that sticks with people far longer than the plot. It does have longer arcs, but even those are often quite disjointed. There's a magical exam arc. How many trials were there and what did they involve? Many will probably remember, but many probably won't, because both the number and the content were arbitrarily chosen. There's not much in the way of reasons to tie them to the rest of the show. What else there would be a problem, here is an asset. In Frieren, the story being disjointed isn't necessarily a problem. It might actually help. It makes you feel a little adrift. It makes you focus on the now. You'll often hear advice like keep the story moving, or that every scene should either move the plot forward or reveal more of the character. But here, plenty of time is spent just meandering. You'll hear that montages are a cheat, to be used sparingly or not at all. Yet here they are enjoyed by many fans of the show. Avoid fillers, you'll hear. But this is a story about the filler, with the end goal being more of an excuse for going on a journey. Now, of course, that's not to say that no advice is useful and that Frieren uses none of it. Most arcs still follow the 3-act structure, one of the most basic tips for storytelling. It also does a wonderful job at hooking you in early on. The hook here is a bit atypical. It's no grand action piece, no question or mystery leaving you wanting an answer, or some atrocity giving you a thirst for revenge. Instead, it opts to play at your heartstrings. It just goes and makes sad, on paper, a weird approach, but it sets the tone and pulls you in. You now feel very connected to the plot and characters, because you are there with them during a very personal moment. It's a slow kind of hook, like sinking into warm water. It's not pulling you into a mystery to solve, but into a mood to feel. And once you're in the space, you're more willing to go along for the ride. What it's doing here is front-loading emotion instead of information. You don't know much about the world yet, but you feel it. You feel its age, its sadness, its weight. That's enough to pull you in. And it's a bold move. Now, my views on the show in general aren't quite as positive as to when it comes to the pacing specifically. If you'd like to hear my take on why it fails at world building, do try this clip. I think the pacing works in spite of many flaws that could have been fixed without damaging the final product. But remember, if you are quite protective of the show and don't want to hear me talk ill of it, maybe just skip out on it.